Just one small correction. I do work this county. I work, I guess you'd say, our whole district, which is about 20-something counties. So I'm kind of scattered out. Normally, y'all do have a Texas Parks and Wildlife biologist specifically for Austin and Colorado counties, but some of you may know that position has been vacant since February of last year. And we're just now hoping to hire somebody here in the next couple of months. But I do work this area. It's just normally there's another biologist this is his priority area, if that makes sense. My phone number's right there if y'all need it. That's out of our LaGrange office. And I guess before we get started, I am going to say there's going to be a little bit of redundancy between this and Daniel's. Not a whole lot, but if your memory is like mine, some redundancy is probably a good thing. If I can get this to work. Oh, all right, we got to plug the machine in. All right, basically what I'm going to talk about is different types of vegetation management throughout this part of the state. What I want to cover is what species should I get rid of, what species should I keep, and how do I get rid of plants I don't want. The main theme I'm going to talk about through this whole presentation is diversity. If you want a diverse animal population, you have to have a diverse plant community. And that don't just mean plant species, but it also means different growths of different plants. First of all, what should I get rid of? As far as I'm concerned, you can get rid of any exotic plant you have on your property. I'm going to mention just a few of the worst ones that I would definitely keep an eye out for. Giant cane, McCartney rose, tallow tree, and what they call multiflora rose, which is a little bit more east of here in the piney woods. But most of these four are not just exotic, but they're very invasive. They're kind of like feral hogs. You're not just going to have one on your property, and you're not going to be able to just manage a few of them. Once you get them, it don't take a lot for them to take over. Here's a whole list of exotics in the state of Texas. And this, I guarantee you, this probably isn't even all of them. But there's some that's obviously hard to read, but I mean, most of our grasses nowadays are exotic. Bermuda grass, bahia, what we call our old world blue stems, KR blue stem, Gardo, Angleton. Now don't confuse those with our native blue stems, little blue stem, big blue stem, stuff of that nature. But get to know your exotics. Oh, that information is not in the book. I didn't get the word till like Wednesday that they needed it, and I was still working on the presentation. But I believe Philip said he's going to try to post it on both Austin and Colorado County websites, so it will be. Real quick, some of these Chinese tallow tree, toxic to most livestock, most animals, and humans. Believe it or not, it was actually introduced by Benjamin Franklin back in the 1700s. You don't ever hear that little glitch he made. Tallow is the most invasive species in Galveston Bay watershed. You can see why it's very invasive. It's tolerant to varying light conditions. It can grow in the understory. It can grow out in the pasture, grow on just about any soil type. It tolerates flooding and tolerates drought. So that pretty much covers it. If you want to take something over, if you're that adaptable, it don't take a whole lot. It's listed as a noxious plant by Texas Department of Ag. So these, a lot of people like planting these in their yard. Now I'm not real sure about the different types of tallow out there right now, if they have a non-fruiting variety, but I definitely wouldn't plant these just for the heck of it. All those trees, both the ones in the back, the big ones and the small ones, that's all tallow tree. They can mature in 3 years and give off lots of seed. They reproduce by cutting them, stumps and roots. So the absolute worst thing you can do is go out there and mow it down. And that goes for a lot of species. Really the only plant we work with, or the only tree we work with that I know of that's not a resprouter, is cedar. That's the one good characteristic about cedar. But yaupon, mesquite, weesach, all of those, if you mow them, you're just going to make them mad, and they're going to come back a lot worse. Daniel had this website on his, so I'm not going to go just real deep into herbicides because there's many herbicides on the market, and they're always coming out with better ones. But if you go through AgriLife, they have a pretty good, I think it's called Chemical Control on Brushlands. So you can go to this bookstore and find it. It's about a 50-page little booklet. Also, they got that Brush Busters program, which gives individual pamphlets for different species. Giant reed, you see this a lot on our roadsides. It grows well on our creek banks. It was introduced in the 1820s. As you see, most of this stuff was introduced on purpose, which is not, was not a good idea. Once again, it can survive extreme drought or excessive moisture, reproduces by rhizomes that easily root and sprout. For the most part, the best way to treat it is just going to be regular Roundup, or glyphosate is be the active ingredient. McCartney rose, it was brought to Texas as a natural hedgerow. It does provide great cover for quail, but once again, I would not try to manage for it. I would try to get rid of it. It prefers the heavier black clay soils, or just clay soils in general. It forms very thick mats. Once again, there's different types of herbicide to use on that. Picloram is one of the main ones that's used. If you have it, try to get rid of it as quick as you can. Don't let the cattle spread it by eating the fruits. It can be set back by mowing and burning. But once again, it's hard to just manage for a little bit of it. So what should you keep? Generally speaking, all native plants have their values in the ecosystem. It's just when they get out of hand that they become a problem. And for the most part, in this part of the world, that's going to be yaupon, cedar, mesquite, and weesach. Mesquite and weesach mainly in your pasture settings. You don't really see it in your woodlands. And once again, the key to managing this species is diversity. Integrated brush management is kind of what we discuss a lot when we talk about brush. It means managing with a long-term perspective, and you think about different goals on your property, whether it's the range, cattle, whatever it may be. But the main thing is this does not mean brush eradication. I can't remember the exact way it went, but if you look back to the 1940s, 50s, they called a lot of their brush management programs brush eradication. And it took them a few years to figure out there's no way they were going to eradicate it. So it's finally adapted into brush management. We're just going to work with what we got, try to keep it under control, try to kill it out in some areas, try to let it grow in others. But it's almost impossible to eradicate some of this stuff once it's here. Different techniques in brush management involve mechanical, chemical, fire, and grazing. Brush sculpting, once again, you're planning and you're selecting it to control. You're trying to manage for wildlife, may be one of your goals, agriculture production, more grass, and you also got to think about your watershed quality. A lot of this brush sculpting that we think of nowadays is more in South Texas, but as I get into this, I'll kind of show you how we can adapt that to this part of the world. This is what most of our woodlands look like nowadays. How many of y'all have woodlands that look like this? Boy, we're in good shape. Only a handful of y'all. We could probably drive down the road and just about every woodland's going to look close to that. A lot of our woodlands are choked out, understory with yaupon and cedar. And this is more what I'm going to kind of discuss as we get into this, trying to manage these woodlands. But first, as a disclaimer, this is not what I'm talking about when I say control and manage your understory. I'm not meaning go out there and make a park out of your property. This is not what post oak savanna is supposed to look like. And I guess I should back up and say most of our woodlands either fit into that category or that category. Neither one of them are really good. You'd be surprised how many times we get a call from a new landowner who just went in, cleared out a whole lot of their brush, made it look like that, and then they want to manage for quail. And it's too late. It's way too late. This is more what I'm talking about when we're talking about managing for your woodlands. That's an ideal woodland. It's very diverse, has a very diverse understory, different shrubby species. It's got a layered forest. When I say layered, it's got overstory trees, it's got mid-story, it's got understory, and then a nice herbaceous layer on the floor. Each one of those different layers has different species of animals that use them. And I'm not a bird expert by any means, but when you start talking about birds, you'll have some birds that just use the overstory. You'll have some birds that use just the forest floor, picking up seeds. You'll have other ones that use the mid-story and understory. So the more diverse you can get that plant community, the better off you'll be. In order to get that open forest, basically you have to open up the canopy and let sunlight get to the floor. If you don't get sunlight to the floor, you're not going to have herbaceous vegetation. And when I say herbaceous, that's mainly grasses, weeds, stuff of that nature. This is one of our management areas down around Gonzales. This is kind of what I picture in my mind as ideal upland, post oak woodland. It's got these patches of native grass in them. Native grass is crucial to nesting ground birds, turkey, quail, stuff of that nature. It's also very important for deer, fawning areas. And within those grassy areas, you get a lot of weeds that come up underneath that grass. It's hard to see here, but there's other forage in there. Grass really isn't the forage. It's more of a cover type for the birds and the animals. But you do get a lot of weeds in there that do provide good forage. Small openings within woodlands, once again, just can provide some really good habitat. If you have this, don't go in there every year and mow it. Let it be a native grass community. It's going to need some disturbance periodically, but if you go in there and mow it every year, you're going to end up converting it slowly to a different type of grass. And obviously, if you mow it, you don't have cover. So, probably one of the best things for managing habitat, and I'm saying this tongue in cheek, is for diesel to get to about $6 a gallon, so people will not sit on the tractor and mow all the time. Hopefully it don't get that high, but who knows. Once native grasses are established, like I said, they need to be managed by periodic grazing or fire. They can get too thick. And if they get too thick, once again, then your ground birds can't scratch for seed. They can't walk through it. So grazing is very beneficial to some of these, or most of these woodlands, when it's used properly. I do not have a problem with cows at all. I do have a problem with the way we use cows. A lot of times we just graze every bit of grass we got. But these woodlands, if you could get good grass growing in them, they could be beneficial for cattle. It'd be a good way to get some extra grass. But the key is know when to pull the cattle out. They should only be in the woodlands just to kind of clean it up, using it as a tool. That should not be their main way to get grass. Burning, I don't know if we have a talk on that today or not, but I know Dave Redden's in the back with the Burn Association for this area. Burning is one of the single best practices we could do to our woodlands today. A lot of our woodlands, other than July and August, a lot of our woodlands aren't even in a condition today where they would burn during a normal this time of year when we do a lot of our prescribed burning. They are so choked out, they usually don't have that fine fuel to get a fire to go through them. Now once again, that August, September, and July, like this past year, anything will burn. So, but for the most part, a lot of our woodlands have a long way to go before we can even get them into burnable condition. Just a small bit on this. This is just kind of more of a pasture and opening areas that you need to manage for. If you got these native grasses, once again, don't go out there and mow them and mow them and mow them. You only need to probably disturb them about once every 2 or 3 years. And once again, when I say disturb, that can be mowing, burning, disking, grazing, stuff of that nature. Cedar invasion. I don't know how many of y'all have noticed all the dead cedar trees out there this year. Honestly, I'm glad a lot of them are dying. They have their place in our woodlands, but not near to the degree that they're at. And just a little spill on this. A lot of times we think of carrying capacity for animals. A piece of land can only support so many animals. That's the same thing can be said for woodlands, for trees. Your land can only support so many trees per acre or so much vegetation per acre because you've only got so much minerals, nutrients, and precipitation. So this drought basically knocked us back closer to a carrying capacity. It just did it in a mean way by not having enough water, insects taking over or coming in, killing some trees. But we can either let nature do it like we just did, or we can be proactive and start managing our woodlands. Cedar, once again, it's not a root sprouter, so if you cut it off low enough, it's not coming back, which is good. Different types of control methods. If you just got a little bit, chainsaw will work. If you got a lot of it, mechanical is probably going to be the way to go. There's different ways. You can either do it by shearing, cutting, and mulching. All of those are going to leave a very low stump. It's very precise. You can pick out which trees you want to take out, which ones you want to leave. Very little soil disturbance. And a good follow-up plan would involve burning. Once you start taking out those cedars and you start opening up that forest floor, you should start getting some grasses come in those openings and hopefully be able to push a fire through some of these woodlands. Pastures, you're going to probably need a little bigger equipment. Usually you got bigger cedar trees, and that's for the most part going to involve dozers. Chemicals will work. Once again, I would suggest going back to the AgriLife extension book. This one particular slide was on our management area over around Wheeling. We just tried some remedy on that one particular one, a basal spray, and within a year it knocked it into the dirt. It killed it. So you could just walk around in the woodlands with just a little 1-gallon sprayer and selectively take out certain species. I'll get into that here in a little bit. Yaupon, in moderation, it's not bad. It can provide good deer browse, provides good berries for birds, good cover, but it gets out of hand quickly. The picture on the left is out of hand. That's not good. The picture on the right is more what we're trying to open up, get more sunlight to the floor. Yaupon, I think Daniel mentioned how hardy it is. It can be sheared, mowed. You can bomb it with a nuclear weapon, and you're still going to have yaupon. If you want it dead, for the most part, chemical is going to be the only way to completely kill it. Managing yaupon could benefit wildlife. And when I say managing it, once again, I'm not saying remove 100% of it. And once again, fire will keep it in balance as you start managing for it. This is one of our biologists in Lee County. He tries to burn his property at least on a 2-year schedule. If he had the right weather, he'd probably do it every year. Yaupon will flare up, but most of the time, this is right on the edge. If you see closest to us, normally you get some grass growth right on the edge. So it takes a lot to get that fire to go into that woodland. Initially, you may have a really big flare up after that, and then it just dies down, and then it just kind of creeps through the woods. So you gotta stay after it every 2 or 3 years. Try to burn that woodland and try to keep pushing it back, and pushing it back. This is what his woodlands look like after probably about 5 to 7 years of burning. He's got some good American beautyberry coming in there, briars, different vegetation that's really good for deer and turkey. That's still a little thick for turkey. It's got better use for deer and songbirds, but as he keeps burning it, it's going to get better and better for other species. Mesquite and weesatch, I'm just going to hit on this just a little bit. It's mainly problematic in our pastures. Basically, the more we overgraze our pastures, the more mesquite and weesatch we get. How many of y'all realize that South Texas used to be a prairie, short grass prairie? You know why it's not a short grass prairie anymore? Because it was overgrazed and overgrazed and overgrazed, and now it's a brush. So basically, if you got a lot of mesquite and weesatch, you've probably got a past history of too much grazing. Chemical is going to be the best way to control that. Once again, if you mow it down, you're going to just end up making it really, really mad, making it hard to kill. What I promote a lot for small landowners is what we call low basal spraying and stump spraying. It's very precise. You can go out there and select what you want to kill, take out the undesirables. It takes very little equipment. And for the most part, you can do it all year. You can do it this time of year, which is great. You don't have to go out there in June, July, and August and die of a heat stroke trying to kill something. You can do it year round. That's basically all you need. You need some, for this case, remedy, maybe some dye so you can tell what you're spraying it on, and a 1 gallon sprayer. You just mix it at a 3-to-1 ratio. So if you got a 1 gallon sprayer, 1 quart of remedy, 3 quarts diesel, and it's that 1 gallon sprayer to me is just right, because you can, don't look at this as you're going to do it all this week. You won't, unless you got like a half an acre. But look at it as a long-term program. Keep your 1 gallon sprayer around. Go out and spray a gallon every now and then, and you'll slowly start making a difference. This here is what I said, the basal spraying. You basically just spray the bottom 12 to 18 inches, and you can treat stems up to a 6-inch tree. The stump spraying, basically like you just cut it off and immediately spray it. And basically, it's the same method, but there may be areas where you don't mind that dead vegetation standing there, and so you just go in and spray it like it's standing there. You may come back in a year or two and mow it, knock it down, burn it, whatever. There may be other areas you want it to look relatively clean, so that would involve cutting it and then spraying it. This was on our management area around Gonzales. We treated it in December 2007. And basically, that's kind of what it looked like. And we just did a little bit, just kind of as an experiment more than anything. I think the next year, you don't see it as fast as if you sprayed the like grass or trees with leaves, and you can see it working pretty quick. If you do this basal spraying, it takes about a year, but it will kill it. The worst thing you can do is spray it and come in within about 2 or 3 months and just mow it, because you want it to stay standing. You want it that chemical to be working in its system. But basically, you can see on the left before and after treatment, and I've been preaching a lot about getting that sunlight to the floor, and that's basically what we're doing. And then once you start getting that fine fuel come in, you'll be able to burn it. And if you don't want to burn it, there's ways around that. You can do some mowing, but burning is one of the best practices. I guess wrapping this up, earlier I talked kind of about the brush management in South Texas and how that's a lot of our mentality is brush control, small brush. But you know, the woodlands we have around here, there's many different ways you can do it. Just do it in stages. If you one of the main things we preach sometimes is mulching. You know, going in there and completely manicuring certain areas and knocking that vegetation way down. But don't do your whole property like that, because basically you don't want to remove all your vegetation. Where I could envision using that mulching is kind of creating some corridors throughout your property. If you have some drainages and creeks run through your property, that's some of your better areas to do it, because wildlife travel those areas anyhow. They should be a little bit more open. And this mulching provides very little soil disturbance. So that's a good way to look at how we recommend mulching. So you may go in a couple of years later. I don't know if you can see that little green I just popped up there. You may go in 2 or 3 years later into this woodland. Maybe do a little herbicide treatment on certain yaupons, cedar, whatever it may be. 2 or 3 years later, you may go into a couple of other spots. One method we use somewhat, I've got a couple of landowners doing it. I actually learned the process from a landowner. He goes into these woodlands with a small dozer. Now, once again, post oaks can be very susceptible to a lot of movement, soil movement, crushing, stuff like that. But he goes into his woodlands that are just got really thick yaupon. He uses a small bulldozer, about a D4 or so, sets the blade up high, about 18 to 24 inches, and basically just runs stuff over. And usually that stuff is so thick, the tracks, once you crush that yaupon down after one pass, you're doing very little soil disturbance. You're not really affecting the roots. And from what I've seen, he has not had much post oak mortality. It's not the prettiest operation, but his goal is to knock that stuff down, make it a better browse plant for deer. Because when it's real tall and rank, deer are not going to use it. You knock it down, you get fresh growth on it, they're going to use it. Plus you start getting other species come in. American beautyberry, greenbriers, that's all excellent forage. And you'll slowly start getting grasses come in there to where you can start managing it easier with a farm tractor or fire, something of that nature. But the key is, and at most, you're going to have to talk to your dozer operator. You don't want to put that blade down low and start removing and start scraping, or you're going to have a lot of dead trees. And you don't want them bumping into your big trees, hitting the bark, putting big scars on them. It just needs to be going in there, walking it down, one pass for the most part, and kind of section out your property, do a little this year, do a little couple years later. But I think you can kind of get the idea. Look at your woodlands. Now, of course, if this is a 5-acre woodland, you're not going to be able to do all this different stuff. But if you got 20, 30, 40-acre woodland, and you go in every couple of years and do 10 to 20% of it, and kind of get on a long-term rotation, you can really increase your wildlife habitat in these woodlands. I got those websites on there. Honestly, I didn't check those lately, so I probably wouldn't write them down. But for the most part, it's the AgriLife bookstore and some invasive websites. All right. Y'all have any questions? Y'all